I was just about to do your introduction, and then from there, I'm just go ahead and get into the questions. So I'm just going to do my introduction real quick.
Okay.
So, okay. So good afternoon, everyone. This is Matthew, your host from the Day and Night Podcast. We have another great episode for you today. We have the amazing Jim Marshall. He's going to talk to you briefly about his creation, which is called Septemics. So I will say I actually purchased your book today on Amazon. So I'm really motivated. I cannot wait to read it. So with no further ado, as always, beautiful people, like, subscribe, comment, and share. And so I'm just going to get straight into it. I thank you, Mr. Marshall, for taking your time out and joining us today. So if you could, what would you like to tell the audience about yourself?
Well, they should know that I am the discoverer of hitherto unknown natural phenomena, which greatly aid in the understanding of people, from which I constructed a revolutionary practical philosophic system called Septemics, and published it in the book, Septemics, Hierarchies of Human Phenomena.
Okay, awesome. Okay, so what exactly is Septemics? I've never heard it before, so this is new for me.
Septemics is a philosophical science based on the fact that many phenomena related to human beings occur in a sequence of 7 levels. Literally, the word septemics means of or pertaining to 7. Septem in Latin means 7. Septemics comprises a collection of scales or sequences, each of which breaks down various human phenomena into a hierarchy of 7 steps. There are 35 such scales, each of which is unique. And between them, they span the spectrum of human experience, by which I mean any problem, situation, dilemma, etc., difficulty that any person has can successfully be analyzed by one or more of these scales, usually more than one.
Okay, awesome. So how is Septemics beneficial for, like, say, myself or just the average person? Why should we actually accept that or even try to navigate it or just try to understand what it is?
Okay, well, let me tell you in general how it's beneficial, and then I'll give you some specific examples to make it more concrete. I wrote this book to help people. I've had a lifetime of helping people. Each of these 35 scales provides the user with an infallible way of determining the salutariness or beneficialness of any group, individual, or activity. I'm giving you a yardstick for measuring human phenomena. If the group, individual, or activity moves persons up these scales, it's beneficial or positive. If it moves them down, it's detrimental or negative. More importantly, just finding out what level you or another person is at on any scale is by itself enlightening and beneficial. The person will always have a realization when he correctly finds a level, whether it's for himself or for another. He'll say, wow, now I understand why I can't get along with Joe, for example. And finally, once you know the actual level of a person on any scale, whether it's yourself or another, you can improve that person by moving them up one level at a time.
Okay.
All of these advantages represent major steps forward for society, and each of these scales is an axis against which to measure or evaluate human behavior. Combined, they empower the person to understand, predict, and manage human affairs to a degree hitherto unattainable by most. Okay. Now, let me give you some examples of how this works. Let's say you have a friend who's having problems with his girlfriend, right? He complains to you about this every time you see him. I don't know what I'm going to do about Margaret. she's driving me crazy, right? So you want to help him because he's your friend.
Mhm.
So you say, Joe, come over here, let me show you this. And you open up the book to the scale of relationships. And he looks at it, he says, you mean there's a scale of relationships? And you say, yes, this relationship that you've been complaining to me about for 5 months, where is it on this scale? He's going to want to know that because he's having trouble and you're opening a door for him. So he looks at it. And what will happen is in a matter of seconds, I'm talking about 15, 20, 25 seconds, he
Wow.
will find a bracket, meaning he will eliminate certain levels. He'll say, oh, well, I can see right off the bat that 1, 2, and 3 definitely don't apply. See, he got it down to 4.
Right.
So he now only has to select from among 4. So then you say to him, okay, let's have you read the chapter and then you can get it exactly. And again, he's going to want to do that because he sees this as a pathway forward for him. So he reads it, and then you can help him with this as a tutor, helping him to understand it. And then you say, okay, now look again. So he looks again, he looks at the 4 that he had narrowed it down to, and he says, well, now I can see we're at level 5. No wonder we're having trouble. That's a very low level. See, he will have a realization. There'll be something specific like, well, this explains why I always had trouble getting her to do X, Y, and Z. That will happen. That tells you you have the right level.
Mm.
Then you can say to him, okay, let's see if we can move this relationship up 1 level. Now, if he's at hypothetically level 5 and he tries to get to 1, 2, or 3, he will fail because it's too steep a gradient. But if he tries to get to level 4, he will get there.
Okay.
Because it's the next level up. In other words, it's natural. It's just like putting 1 foot in front of the next.
Okay.
And one of the axioms of the subject is that you can never skip a level. You always move to an adjacent level.
Mm.
So this is useful because it means if you're at 5, the only possibilities are 4 or 6. Now, if he deteriorates, he's going to go down to 6. So you can predict how the deterioration will occur. Or if it improves, it will go up to 4, so you can predict the improvement.
Okay.
Okay, so then you can say to him, all right, now let's look at this. And you open the book to the scale of sexuality. Look at this, Joe. And Joe looks at it and he says, you mean there's a scale of sexuality? Yes. You don't have to tell me if you don't want. Well, where are you on the scale for your own illumination? So he looks at it and he says, well, I can see right away that definitely 6 or 7 don't apply to me. And also 1 and 2 don't apply. It's got to be either 3, 4, or 5. Okay, good. So now let's have you read the chapter. He reads it, right? See, he had his bracket. He reads it. He comes back and he says, well, now that I've read this, I can see I'm at level 4. And you say, great, let's move you to level 3. See? Then you say, okay, let's have you look at the scale of permeation. He says, what's that? And you explain to him, permeation is the basic action of a spiritual being.
Mm-hmm.
When 2 people love one another, it's because they are permeating one another. Mm-hmm. So he looks at the scale, and again, he will find a bracket. He'll say, well, definitely I'm not at level 6 or 7. I'm definitely better than that, and I'm definitely not 1. See, so we got it down to 4. So you say to him, all right, read the chapter. And he reads the chapter. You can help him out. Comes back and he finds, well, I can see now I'm at level 4. That's not too bad. That's in the middle. But Gertrude is at level 5. See, that's not as good. Mm-hmm. That explains why we're having trouble. So you say, okay, let's move you up to level 3, and then you will permeate her better. You see? And he might want to take this to his girlfriend and say, look at this. See, don't tell her, just say the same process. look at this. Where are you on the scale? See? And she'll eventually go through the same process. She'll find a bracket, read the chapter, she'll find it, and then he can help her to move up to a higher level, and then she's permeating better. Now, you may have noticed sometimes you have a couple, smart, attractive, like one another, but they just can't have a romantic relationship. It doesn't work for them. This is one of the reasons why they're not permeating. See, most people don't know about this. Mm-hmm. And this is why you have people who are not terribly smart, not terribly well educated, don't work particularly hard, but they do very well. It's because they're permeating. Mm. Okay? So that's one of the mysteries of life solved by this scale. Now, I could keep doing this. I could do a half a dozen more just like this. Because when you have something complex like a romantic relationship, right, there's going to be many scales that apply. Mm-hmm. So you could keep doing this. Now, by the time you finish this process, let's say you go through 8 scales, and Joe finds his level on 8 scales, his whole understanding of this relationship is dramatically different. He has clarity. He has insight. He knows what's going on. Now, this could go a couple of ways. See, we're not telling him what to do about this. We're just helping him understand it. He might say, I can see now that with a little work, we could really have a good relationship. Or he might say, I'm done with this woman. Mm-hmm. Why am I killing myself? She's lower than me on all these different scales. I'm breaking up with her. Now, you might think he's going to be bummed out about that. And that's not so. Because every time you find a correct level, you have a realization and you're pleased with the result. You say, oh, yeah, now I see what's going on. That's why, boppity, 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 bop. So no matter what level you find, you're not going to have a bad reaction. It's not like finding a low level makes you upset. It doesn't. It makes you feel better because it's the truth. And you now have a grasp on what's going on. So this works really well in helping people in their lives. And that's the whole point of this. So that's a general idea how this works.
So I love it. It sounds almost foolproof. So one question I have, is this like one setting when they're reading a book, or is it over a time period, say a month, 2 months? Is it based on the individual? Or is this a certain time period you have to complete these different levels in?
Well, at any point in time, every person is at some level on every scale. So this girlfriend he has, she's on some level on every one of these scales. She just doesn't know it. So if he were to get her to look at it and find her levels, she would have realizations, and then she would have a much better grasp on this whole subject. Maybe he's the right guy and maybe he's not. See, that's up to her to decide. So the other thing I have to say is the data is there. It's just sitting there waiting for you to access. So take anybody your friend Alex. He's at some level on every scale. Mm-hmm. You say, Alex, you're having trouble with this? Look at this, figure out where you are, and then you will understand what the next step is, and you can improve yourself. So if a person were to, and I recommend this, if a person were to go through this book and find his level on every scale, each of the 35 scales, by the time he finished, he would be a new person. He would be a clarified person. In other words, his mind would be clear. He would understand, okay, now I see where I am in life. Now I see what's going on with this and with this and with this and with this. And then he would be able to go forward in a productive way because the scale tells you how to proceed. Now, So, and let me tell you why this is workable. I have solved the gradient problem that has bedeviled mankind for 6,000 years. Most people have problems or situations or dilemmas or whatever, and they don't know what to do about it. They don't know how to fix it. The reason for that is they don't know the gradient.
Mm.
So let's say you have some guy, right? He's 100 pounds overweight. He's tried everything. He's tried Weight Watchers. He tried fasting. Nothing has fixed this, right? It's driving him nuts. So this guy doesn't know the gradient. Now, I have worked as a trainer. Okay. If this guy came to me and said, Jim, would you help me with this? I'd say, sure. So I'm not going to just say, go out and run 5 miles, or here's 100 pounds and lift this. That's malpractice. I would say to him, so let me ask you something. Do you think you could walk 1 mile every morning? Right? And he's probably going to say, if there's nothing really wrong with his legs, he's probably going to say, yeah, I think I can do that. Mm-hmm. All right. And I would say, okay, so let's have you walk 1 mile every morning. And at the end of the week, talk to me again. So I talk to him at the end of the week. And if he says to me, this has gotten very easy for me. It was hard at first, but now it's easy. I'd say, great. Let's improve to 1.5 miles every day. Now, if he says to me, this is tough, I'd say, okay, let's just keep doing the mile. See, that's finding the gradient. You cannot make a couch potato an Olympic athlete. There are too many intervening levels, right? You have to first make them from a couch potato into a normal person, right? Then you might be able to make him into a guy who's interested in working out. See, then you might be able to make him interested in a guy who wants to compete in some kind of a sport. You see, there's all these intervening gradations. So maybe 5 years later, he's in the Olympics. But it can't, that is why crash diets and crash exercise programs don't work. Mm-hmm. Every good counselor, therapist, facilitator, coach, etc., in the world understands that human development has to be done on a gradient. Say you take an algebra teacher. He knows all the gradients for teaching algebra. He knows first you have to know this. What is a variable? Right? You have to get that concept. And then he says, okay, now what is an equation? See, and he brings you along little by little, and by the end of 2 semesters, you know algebra.
Right.
Yeah. So that's what all the good teachers and coaches and facilitators and therapists do. So I had a career as a human development engineer, and that's all I did. I would find the gradient the guy was at, and I would help him by his own realization to get to the next higher level. And that's how I discovered these data.
Okay, so basically what I'm hearing is this gradient and this whole septemics is based off of a mathematical equation. Is that correct?
You could say that, but I think it would be more accurate to say it's based on natural law.
Okay.
But just to clarify, because you're very close to the truth in what you said, anything that has mathematics embedded in it is natural law. Okay. Like, for example, the Fibonacci sequence, Newton's 3 laws of motion. Mm-hmm. Okay, the Pythagorean theorem, mm-hmm. The periodic table. They all have mathematics embedded in them. And that was really how I figured this out, by that realization when I started finding this data.
Okay. All right. So as far as with the scale, so does someone's belief, would that cause conflict as far as that they're a highly religious person and based off of what's on the scale? And like something, when I was in psychology, one of the things that I focused on was Maslow's hierarchy of, I forget the last word.
I know what you mean by that, yeah. Yes.
So how do you navigate that scale if you have those as well, because to me, it seemed like it would cause a little bit of conflict and the person's personal beliefs. It's
Okay,
like you have to push those aside and say, okay, I'm just going to focus on this scale and base everything off what the scale says where I should be at, if that
okay.
makes sense.
These scales apply to people in general across all lines, be they gendered, racial, ethnic, historical, social, religious, cultural, economic, education, profession, geographic, national, age, etc. None of that matters. Okay? Doesn't matter if you're old, if you're young, if you're male, if you're female, if you're white, if you're black. Doesn't matter. They apply because it's natural law. It's like, does the periodic table apply to someone who's a Christian? Yes. Does it apply to someone who's not a Christian? Yes, because it's natural law. Okay? Or do the three laws of motion apply to someone who is tall? Yes. Does it apply to someone who's short? Yes. It's the same thing. And hopefully later I'll explain how I figured this out, because then you'll see actually
Okay.
the origin of this and where it
Right.
came from. But that is not a problem, because we're not asking somebody to stop being a Christian, stop being a Buddhist, stop being a Muslim. That's got nothing to do with this. Okay.
Right.
This is natural. It's just like if you said to me, Jim, come over to my house. I want to show you my garden. I'd say, great, I'll be right over, right? So you take me into your garden, and I say, oh, Matt has tulips, he has hydrangeas, he has peonies, he has roses, he has tulips, he has violets, because I know flowers.
Mm-hmm.
Now, you bring some little 5-year-old kid into your garden, he'll like it. He'll say, oh, these are pretty and they smell nice. That's all he knows.
Mm-hmm.
He doesn't know the difference between a tulip and a rose. See, they're completely different creatures.
Okay.
Tulip grows from a bulb, roses on a bush, completely different. Genetically, they're completely different. But most people are like that little kid as regards human beings.
Right.
They don't know what they're looking at.
Mm-hmm.
So once you know this data, when you look at a person, you can see where the person is on these various scales. And I hasten to add, never tell anyone the level of any living person on any scale. It's counterproductive and unethical. People don't want to hear that. You know, the wife says to the husband, you know what's wrong with you? You don't work hard enough. Blah, 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 blah. He doesn't want to hear that, right?
Right.
It's better if she says, Ralph, let me show you something. Look at this book. It's got a scale of management. Oh, you mean there's a scale of management? Oh, I can use this in my business. See, he looks at it, see, and he has a realization, and then he's able to manage his business better. Well, that's what she was complaining about, you see? So it gets fixed without her insulting him.
Right.
The other thing is, when the person finds it himself, and believe me, it's not hard, he has a realization. Always. He looks at this. Let's say he analyzes his mother on the scale of motivation. Oh, that's my mother's motivation. That explains why she does this and this and this. See, he now understands her better. So if you just told him, that would deprive him of the realization. Because that is the way this is designed. It's designed to lead you to a realization. That's how I wrote it, in such a way that when you read it, you get it. And because it's natural law, it's not obscure. It's like when you show somebody the Pythagorean theorem. Now, it has a big name, but once you explain it to somebody, it's very simple. You know, like if I want to go out in my garden and measure the diagonal, I don't need to do that. I know it's 50 feet this way and it's 30 feet this way. I sit down, I calculate it, and I got the number. I don't need to measure it because of the Pythagorean theorem. So it's very useful in the same way. So that is not a problem, because you're not telling anybody what to think or what to do or how to proceed. You're just showing him a book and asking him, okay, so where is your girlfriend Gloria's level on this scale? Oh, yeah, I would like to know that. See, he's going to want to know. And he will look at it and he will get it. Now, let me tell you an anecdote, how easy this is to use. About 22 years ago, I'm talking to a friend of mine about government and politics, just two guys standing around talking. And this book was in the early stages in a transcript form. He didn't know anything about it. He didn't even know I was writing a book. So I had the scale of government by then. So I pulled it out and I just said, take a look at this. So he took it, he looked at it, and in about a second, he literally pointed. He said, there, I'm right there. He found his level on that scale without my even suggesting that it was for. That's what it was for. That's how easy this is to get. And I'll tell you another thing that happens with this all the time. Guy's looking at it, you can get some scale, just reading it, right? And he says, wait a minute, level 4, that's my father-in-law. He's just like that. You nailed it. I don't know this guy's father-in-law, but this is natural law, you see?
Right.
So it's like, once you know what a tulip is, you go around and say, oh, there's a tulip. See? Every tulip is unique, and they come in many colors, but you know what a tulip is, so when you see one, you can spot it. That's what this is like. It's not about judgment. That's why you don't tell the person what this is about. You just get him to use it, and it's not difficult to use because it's natural law.
Okay, so that's one thing I want to focus on just real quick. Now, I myself, I know what natural law is, but for someone that may have never heard that term before, or they just heard it like loosely, do you explain in your book exactly what natural law is and how to identify it? Because with my children, I know for a fact they have never been taught, other than me, like introducing it to them, what natural law is. So, is
Right.
there any way you can expound a little bit more for those that may be watching that don't have any clue what natural law is?
Sure. Okay. Let's say you take the periodic table of elements.
Okay.
Okay. Now, the periodic table of elements is true for people everywhere in the galaxy, everywhere in the universe. Okay. It's just a way of putting all of the elements in the correct sequence, vertically and horizontally, so you can understand them because they fall into groups and periods. And this is very useful. Once you understand the periodic table, chemistry really is open to you. I mean, you can see why sodium and potassium replace one another in your bloodstream. They have the same valence. They're right in the same group. Okay? So that was true before Earth existed, and it will still be true after Earth no longer exists. Or another example, Newton's 3 laws of motion. Okay, so Newton is considered the father of physics. Okay, his 3 laws of motion, to any student of physical science, especially physics, they're so simple and clear, they almost seem obvious. But nobody figured them out before him. He's the guy who finally sat down and wrote this, and these are the laws of motion, period. Those laws existed not only before Newton found them, they existed before Earth existed. They existed before the solar system existed. Okay? That's what we mean by natural law, like the Fibonacci sequence. Okay? So you can look at a sunflower, a pine cone, seashells, and you'll see they're actually constructed by Fibonacci numbers. Okay? Those creatures don't know anything about numbers, let alone Fibonacci, but that's how they construct their bodies because it's a natural law. Now, Fibonacci, who was a brilliant mathematician, came along and said, wait a minute, there's something going on here. Let me look at this. And he figured out the formula, how you calculate these numbers. And so now we can calculate those numbers to infinity. So there are Fibonacci numbers, and creatures construct themselves according to these numbers, even though they don't know anything about it. It's the same thing with septemics. People are on these levels and moving to adjacent levels without knowing anything about it because it's natural law.
Okay. So how did you discover it? Were you actually knowing exactly what you was doing when you discovered it, or was it something you just stumbled upon?
It's more the second one, but let me tell you the whole story because it really
Okay.
tells you a lot about what this is and why it's valid.
Okay.
The story really begins, I think, when I was accepted into engineering school at age 16. Now, of course, I thought, like all the other engineering students, that I would be engineering physical things such as electrons, airfoils, motors, and gears, and things like that. But by the time I had my bachelor's degree, it was clear to me that I wanted to engineer the human psyche because it is the area of greatest unknown, of greatest mystery, and more importantly, the area in which we as a race are failing miserably.
Mm.
95% of the problems that people have in industrialized society are because they don't understand people, don't
I
understand the
agree.
boss, don't understand the wife, don't understand the son, don't understand the mother. This goes in all directions. Okay? Now, that was not true 500 years ago. Okay? They didn't have antibiotics, they didn't have analgesics. Okay? There were still all kinds of major problems. Still, people, we don't have that anymore. Very few people starve to death. We have all kinds of medicine. So the real problem now is communicating with people, understanding. That is why we elect idiots to run our governments, because we don't understand people.
Mm.
Okay? For example, I can tell you the basic purpose of every president of the United States, going back as far as Franklin Delano Roosevelt, and many of the presidents previous to Roosevelt who I studied, such as Lincoln and Washington and Jefferson. Okay? What could possibly be more important than knowing someone's basic purpose? That's what the person is trying to do all the time. That's really important. So the other thing you have to realize is people tell you their levels. Comes right out of their mouths. Okay, so if you just listen, shut up and listen, you'll get it. Okay, so I'm going to try to answer your question now. So
Okay.
to make a long story short, I had a long career as a human development engineer, using engineering principles, working one-on-one with hundreds of clients of every description. All of my clients improved as a result of our work together. Okay, this was cumulatively many, many thousands of hours, maybe 10,000 hours of work. Now, as this was going on, I started to notice fairly early on that I could predict the outcome of the session.
Mm.
And I didn't tell that to anybody, but I made notes. And I started collecting this information. And as the decades rolled by, I came to realize that the client would be at a specific level on a specific scale that I had previously observed. And as a result of our interaction, he would go up to the next level. Now, this happened thousands and thousands of times. And each time it did, it verified my hypothesis. A hypothesis that I had not shared with anybody. So nobody knew about this.
Wow.
Now, by 1995, a couple of things happened. One is by then I had about 32 skills that I had just observed and wrote them down. There's no theory of systemics. Now, the other thing that happened was there was a particularly difficult client who I was pondering, and I realized that this client was at a level on a scale that I had not previously observed. So this was a 6-level scale that by then I absolutely knew axiomatically was correct because I had been watching it work for decades. And it was obvious to me from the content where to insert this level. So when I inserted this 7th level into the 6-level scale, it manifested mathematically. All of these mathematical implications jumped out at me. Now, if you understand math, that is the whole point of math. You start with an equation or a formula and you coax data out of it.
Okay.
That's how Einstein found E equals mc squared, by that same process that every mathematician uses. So you have to understand, I took 26 semesters of math and loved every minute of it. So I have a mathematical mind. So when I saw all these mathematical implications jump out at me without my even looking for them, they were just there. This scale became a plane. It went from being a line to being a whole body of data. And I said, whoa, I don't know what this is, but whatever the hell it is, it's natural law because it's got mathematics embedded in it. So then I said, wait a minute. I wonder how many of these other scales of varying lengths are actually 7-level scales that hadn't been developed all the way because I wasn't developing anything. I was just helping my clients and making notes.
Wow.
So knowing what I was looking for, I inspected these other scales. And a short period of time, each one of them went to 7 levels. And as it did, it manifested mathematically. And mathematics were just there. See, before, they didn't see mathematical because I didn't have all the levels. But once I had all the levels, then the mathematics jumped out at me. So in a short period of time, I had 32 7-level scales that all had mathematics embedded in them. And then I said to myself, wait a minute. I could go from helping people by the hundreds, which is what I had been doing as human development engineer, to helping people by the millions if I put this in a book and get it out to people for them to use. So I'm going to have to write a book. So the first draft was completed in December of 95, which was on the tail of all these incidents I just told you.
Wow.
And then I sent it out to colleagues of mine, all of whom had graduate degrees in a variety of subjects. Okay? And they all responded very positively. They had different responses, but the responses were distinctly positive. And that told me, okay, this is exactly what I think it is. It's a new subject based on natural law that anybody can use.
Wow.
Now, I have to tell you, December of 95 was the first version, right? That's 28 years ago. So since then, I've had 28 years of observing people using this. Because what happened was, I sent out the first version, I got feedback. I thought, well, I could say this better. I rewrote it. Sent out the second version because I would release it to students and clients and colleagues and so forth every time I had a new version. And I would get feedback. And the feedback would sort of tell me things like what's working, what's not. And so I rewrote it and I rewrote it and I rewrote it. And I kept pushing it toward a point where it would be universally applicable to anyone who could read English and wanted to improve himself or others. That was my standard. Now, I have to understand, as an engineer, I'm only interested in facts and results. In engineering, opinions and beliefs are irrelevant. The bridge must stand over the river. Okay? So that is how we calculate things. Okay? We can calculate how many cars are actually going to be on this bridge at any one point in time, how much weight that is, and therefore we know it's got to exceed that, and so we add a certain percentage, and that's how we calculate the strength of the bridge. You see, there's no guessing. It's calculated. Okay, so there is some civil engineer out there who knows from calculation that when you go around this clover leaf, you have an angular velocity that's going to move the car away from the turn, and therefore the maximum safe speed is 35 miles per hour, and that's what it says on the sign. See, there's no guessing. So as an engineer, my purpose was to craft something that would work all the time for everyone who was interested in this. And I know I succeeded at that because I've been watching reactions to this for 28 years. You don't have to have a college degree to know how this works. So people get this. Now, you have to know how to read English reasonably well. But remember, I don't know if you've looked in the book, but there is a glossary, not only in front of every chapter, even in front of the introduction, there's a glossary. So I'm helping you with the words. So when you come to the word permeation, I'm telling you right there, this is what permeation means. See? So then you go to the scale and you have a way of getting a grip on this idea. So you have to realize that I spent 25 years writing this book.
Wow.
Because, first of all, I had to discover the phenomena. Now, I already told you pretty much how that was done. I would see this in a session, and I would see it as a phenomenon, and then I would go outside in life, and I'd see it all over. Every place I looked, people at these levels, see? I would see them go up levels and down levels. So then you have to realize 35 scales, 7 levels each, that's 245 different levels.
Wow.
Each one had to be ascertained, verified, and more importantly, expressed in a way that would make sense to the average reader. Because we're dealing in concepts here. So you have to give the correct label to it so the guy sees, okay, I see what that is. So then, after I had the phenomena, you have to realize, while I was writing the book, I found 3 more scales, which is why I wound up being 35. So then I had to take this data and use it to craft a workable philosophic system. That took 20 years. Because simply having the scales is not enough. So all of these scales had to be developed so that each one is a whole body of data on the corresponding phenomenon. And if you allow me, I'll tell you what those 35 subjects are.
Yes, I would love to.
Okay, so there are 24 individual scales, meaning they apply primarily to an individual, and 11 group scales, meaning they apply primarily to groups. These are the individual scales. The scale of basic purposes, the scale of personal influence, the scale of choice, the scale of permeation, the scale of thought, the scale of identity, the scale of evaluation, the scale of motivation, the scale of control, the scale of stopping, the scale of scholarship, the scale of literacy, the scale of human ability, the scale of memory, the scale of spiritual identity, the scale of mental deletion, the scale of aberration, the scale of physical fitness, the scale of justification, the scale of belief, the scale of equanimity, the scale of attack, the scale of conflict, the scale of reaction. And these are the group scales: the scale of relationships, the scale of life spheres, the scale of government, the scale of civilization, the scale of survival, the scale of management, the scale of exchange, the scale of communication, the scale of allegiance, the scale of sexuality, and the scale of politics. Now, in light of the fact that each one of these scales is unique, you can see how this spans the spectrum of human experience. I've covered it all. So basically, you have a situation, a problem, a dilemma, whatever it is, a difficulty. You want to try to get a grip on it. So you look for the scale that you think is relevant. Right? Let's say you're dealing with somebody, you don't really know what his motivation is. Well, you look at the scale of motivation. Right? That's very important. That's how the police solve crimes, by the motive. If a guy has no motive, he's not a suspect. Oh, this guy is collecting $1 million insurance from the death, he's a suspect. See, there's a motive there. So this is very useful. to understand what are people doing? Why are they doing it? Okay, so it works for groups, it works for individuals too. Now, to finish answering your question about where this came from, right? So the hardest part about this was expressing this in a way that would make sense to the average reader of English. And I know I succeeded because I've been seeing the results for 28 years.
Mm.
All kinds of people in different subjects, in different socioeconomic levels. You have to be able to read really well. But look, somebody who doesn't read well is not going to read a book anyway.
True.
So there are about 1.5 speakers of English on Earth. I estimate that 1 billion of them can read this book. And you have to realize that the other factor is this is for people who want to improve themselves or others. So you might think, well, everybody wants that. No, I'm sorry, that's not true. There are many groups of people that have no interest in improving themselves or others. These would include psychopaths, sociopaths, narcissists, corrupt politicians, war criminals, serial murderers, professional criminals, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Right? If you have some guy who dropped out of high school, became a drug dealer, right? He's not interested in improving himself or his wife or his mother. Right. He's interested in making that deal, getting $1 million, buying a Cadillac, and getting some cocaine for himself. See? That's what he's in. So people like us are interested in this. So I've actually done some calculation, and I calculate that about 50% of the human race, it wants to improve oneself or another. Now, why do I say oneself or another? You could have someone, let's say hypothetically, have somebody, he's got 180 IQ, he's got $10 million in the bank, and he's got a body like Arnold Schwarzenegger used to have. Okay? You say, well, this guy doesn't need this book. Okay, but he might have a daughter who's getting involved in drugs. He might have a wife who's cheating on him, right? He might have a brother who can't keep a job. So he gets out the book. He says, come here, brother, let's look at this. You see? He helps the daughter, he helps the wife. So he's helping others. So that's why I say it's for people who want to improve themselves
and others. Got it.
So that's about half the human race. And you have to realize that, just for frame of reference, in the world of nonfiction publishing, if you sell 10,000 books, that's considered a hit.
Wow.
Okay. And my public is 1 billion people. If you look at English readers, but then if you cut that in half and say, well, only about half of them are really interested in improving themselves, cuts it down to about 500 million people. So that's how many people would benefit from this book. Because if you can read English reasonably well, and you want to help yourself or others, this book is for you. Now, I have to tell you, I went out of my way to write this book in a way so that once you get the book, you don't need anything else to use it. You don't need to join a club. You don't need to spend money. You don't need to hire a facilitator. You don't need to join a religion. All these things that people do, I'm not knocking any of them. I'm just saying you don't need that. The only thing you might need is a dictionary, but I would say that's true for every book on earth.
Yes. I
would never teach anybody anything without having a dictionary, even math and science. Like you teach, I've done a lot of tutoring of math. They say absolute value. I don't really understand absolute value. What does the word absolute mean to you? Gee, I don't know. Okay, let's look it up.
Right.
So even if you're studying math and science, it's still written in your language, English or whatever other language you might speak. So you need the dictionary always. But the beauty of it is everybody has a dictionary now in his pocket.
Yeah, true.
You pull out your phone, there's a dictionary. Or if you're on Kindle, you just tap the word and it gives you the definition. It's very easy now. So that's the only thing you might need, because if you don't understand the words, you won't understand the subject, because that's all this is words. It's a philosophic science. So
Got it.
it's all about words. So that's why I put all those glossaries in there. Not only glossaries, but each of the 35 subjects that I just read to you, I give in the chapter, right at the beginning of the chapter, a synonym.
Mm.
In other words, I give you an alternate name, so you have some depth of understanding. Similarly, there are 7 levels, right? Each of those has a name, and I give a synonym for that. So when you have a synonym, in a sense, that tells you a lot about this. It tells you a lot about that word. So between the synonyms and the glossaries, this is not hard to understand. The other thing, more importantly, is people tell you their levels. And I'll give you an example of something that happens frequently. Guy's looking at the book, right? Let's say he's looking at the scale of choice, right? And he gets down to level 5 and he says, wait a minute, this is my brother-in-law. This is exactly how he is. I don't know this guy's brother-in-law, but it's so precise and it's natural law. He's not even thinking about his brother-in-law, but it jumps out at him. See, like if I said, I know this guy, he's black, he has a beard, he wears glasses, he's well-built, and he wears t-shirts. So that's Matt. Right? Excuse me. I don't know, coughing. So it jumps out at you.
Right.
So you can spot people's levels pretty easily.
Okay. So I have a question from one of the viewers, and her question is, what do you do once you find out or find the number you're on, the level?
Okay. First of all, if you correctly find it, you will have a realization. You'll have an insight. So, oh, that explains why this guy did that thing. See, that tells you you've got the right level. If you don't have a realization, you don't have the right level. That's number one. The next thing is you then can move yourself up to the next highest level. And that is always doable because it's the next gradient. It's like the example I gave you before. The guy's walking a mile. He says it's easy. Okay, let's go to a mile and a half. It's the next gradient. See, he'll be able to do that. He might have a little trouble the first couple of days, you see. I'm not telling him to walk 5 miles. That's too steep a gradient. So in engineering, we have a principle that says 90% of finding the correct answer is asking the right question. When I, in 1995, looked at that original scale and said, wait a minute, I wonder if these other scales are actually 7-level scales that had not been developed all the way because I wasn't developing anything. See, I said, so I'm going to look at these. I was asking the right question. So I was able to find the answer. So in a sense, when you find the level, you have a realization, you're sort of asking the right question because the next level up is your answer.
Yeah, makes sense.
You know? So it's like if I give you an answer and I say, what's the question? You know how Karnak, Johnny Carson used to do Karnak? He'd give an answer and then the question would be revealed, right? That's sort of what like this is. The next level up is the answer for you. So it's not that hard because you know what level you're at. You know what the next level up is. Now, what you have to do, how long it's going to take, et cetera, that is a wild variable because every person is unique and every situation is unique. So you have to use some intelligence, some insight to figure out how you're going to get there. But that is not the problem is not knowing where you're going to go. You know that I'm giving it to you. It's just working out the tactics,
Mhm.
So what's next? Should I swim laps? Should I run laps? Should I pump iron? That's like different ways to get up the scale of physical fitness. And it's going to be different answers for different people.
Okay.
So that's where it's up to you, to be honest with yourself and realistic and say, okay, what do I have to do here? And then you'll get up to the next level. And when you get up to the next level, you then can move up to the next level beyond that. And that's a whole new project because it's a different level, it's a different concept, and you're going to have to change again to get up to that. So this is about changing yourself for the better.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so I'm listening to you, and I'm like heavily into chakras. So I kind of compare that because there's seven chakras, and then you got the lower chakra. I mean, that's your lower self, and then the higher you go, you reach your spirituality, and it's higher chakra. So I always, do my best to ascend, is what I call it, and to become a better person. So as I'm moving up the level of the chakras, I'm becoming a better person. Essentially, I'm going to reach that higher self, is what I call it. And just listen to you talk about the 7 levels, and that's what it sounds like to me. I believe everything is connected. So it makes perfect sense to me. I don't know if that relates to what your septemics is, or if that makes sense. I'm just
It
curious
does.
of what your
I
perception is.
say in the book, there's a whole section called Why 7?
Mm-hmm.
And I explain why 7. It's a
Yeah.
mathematical explanation. And it's axiomatic. There's no getting away from it. And
Mm-hmm.
I say, I knew all about the chakras long before I thought about this. That
Mm-hmm.
was one of the clues to me.
Yeah.
That was a clue that sort of pointed me in this direction.
Mm-hmm.
Because when I saw that scale manifest mathematically, I said, oh, 7, that's like the chakras. Oh, so that's sort of like an antecedent to
Mm-hmm.
this subject.
Mm-hmm.
So that's right. You're going right down Main Street with the subject when you talk about the chakras.
Okay, awesome. So before I let you go, do you speak? Do you have any speaking engagements where someone can actually go to like a seminar, hear you speak? I know you have the book out, but do you have anything on social media where someone can just listen to you talk about septemics, or whatever else that you um, belief in, or what you're putting out? Just how can someone find you? And as I was saying, do you have any speaking engagements coming up? If you can just
Okay.
expound on that.
Okay. So first of all, I have done well over 200 interviews like this one.
Mm-hmm.
They're all over the internet. If you just go to YouTube and search Jim Marshall Septemics, you'll get about 100 interviews. Come right up. So they're all over the place.
Okay.
Okay, so that's easy, So, but let me tell you one sentence that is really important for your listeners to know. The data in this book are vital for every person and can help you to achieve your goals faster and easier by explaining what might otherwise seem to be inexplicable or random.
Nice.
So we have a guy, he can't figure out what's going on with his girlfriend. What the hell is she doing? Why does she do that? He can't figure it out, right?
Mm-hmm.
By the time he analyzes her across these 35 axes, he's got it. He knows exactly what she's about. I'll give you an example. When Obama decided to run for president, most of us had no idea who he was. He had only been in the Senate for 2 years. Now, the people from Illinois knew who he was because they had elected him to the Senate.
Right.
But the rest of us in the 49 states, most of us, who's this guy with the funny name? I never heard of this guy,
Yeah.
right? So I thought, well, this guy's running for president. I better find out. So I made a little project for myself, went out of my way to listen to him, to observe him. And I, after some time, spotted his basic purpose. And again, what could be more important than knowing someone's basic purpose? Because what's what he's trying to do all the time,
Right.
right? So that informed me about him. So this is very practical and useful. I designed these scales to wrap around the reader. The way you experience this book is it's like you put on glasses and you look in the mirror. So you see yourself better. Or you put on glasses and you look at somebody else, your wife, or your boss, or whatever, and you see them with clarity. It's not that hard to do. And the reason it's not hard to do is because it's natural law. Now, let me explain it this way. If someone were to invite you to a rendezvous, you would certainly expect them to tell you the time, the date, the location, the specific location, and perhaps also how to get there. Needless to say, it's difficult to get somewhere if you don't know where you are, don't know where you're going, and don't know how to get there. Now, this sounds idiotic, but most people do this regularly.
Yeah.
And many people do this continuously. You ever see somebody like that, just goes in circles, never gets anywhere. So this book solves that because it enables you to find across 35 axes where you are, what the next step up is, how to get there. It's very specific. So this is like 35 maps for success.
I love it.
Yeah.
Okay, so I'm definitely going to, I can't wait to receive the book tomorrow. So I'm definitely going to dive into it, and I will reach out and let you know, if it works or not, and, what comes of it. So again, I thank you for taking time out. I've definitely learned something, and hopefully the viewers learned something. So I wish you, the best for the rest of your day. And I'll keep in contact with you. I'll be checking you out on YouTube and continuing to follow you. So again, sir, I thank you and enjoy the rest of your day. And Godspeed.
Thank you, Matt. It was a pleasure.
All right. Have a good day. Bye.
Okay. So are we off the air now?
Yes.
Okay. So let me tell you something.